Have you ever watched a group of people make a catastrophically wrong decision and then act like nothing happened? Maybe it was at work. A team voted on a strategy everyone secretly knew was flawed. It failed. And then, silence. No apology. No accountability. Just a quiet move to the next project, as if the mistake never existed. Or maybe it was in your family. A collective choice that hurt someone. And years later, nobody talks about it. Here's what psychology actually says about this. Groups don't just make bad decisions by accident. They are wired to make them, and wired even harder to never feel sorry about them. In this video, you're going to understand exactly why that happens, and what it reveals about the hidden mechanics of human behavior when we're inside a group. Stay until the end, because the last pattern I'll show you explains something most people never realize about their own choices. When something goes wrong alone, you feel it immediately. The guilt lands directly on you. There's nowhere to pass it. But inside a group, something strange happens. Psychologists call it diffusion of responsibility. The more people are involved in a decision, the less any single person feels personally accountable for the outcome. Think about it this way. If 10 people vote to do something that later causes damage, each person unconsciously calculates their share of the blame as 1/10. 10% doesn't feel like enough to carry guilt over. So nobody does. This isn't weakness. It's not even selfishness. It's a deep cognitive mechanism, the same one that explains why bystanders don't help someone in danger when a crowd is watching. Everyone assumes someone else will step in. The group doesn't just dilute responsibility. It actually erases it. And here's what makes this dangerous. The bigger the group, the worse the decisions tend to be, because the fear of personal consequences disappears almost completely. But diffusion of responsibility is just the entry point. The second mechanism is far more invisible, and it starts operating before the decision is even made. In 1972, psychologist Irving Janis studied some of the biggest political disasters in American history and found a disturbing pattern. The smartest people in the room kept making the dumbest decisions together. He named this phenomenon groupthink, and it works like this. Inside any cohesive group, there's an invisible pressure to maintain harmony, to not be the one who disrupts the mood, to not be labeled as negative, difficult, or disloyal. So people stop voicing doubts. They assume that if nobody else is objecting, the idea must be fine. And gradually, the group convinces itself of something that none of its individual members might have chosen alone. The terrifying part? Nobody is lying. Nobody is pretending. They genuinely start to believe the group's version of reality, because agreeing feels safe and questioning feels like a threat to belonging. This is why entire organizations can march confidently toward disaster, while smart individuals inside them feel a quiet unease they never voice out loud. And there's a signal that groupthink is happening. Watch for the moment when a group stops asking, "Is this right?" and starts asking, "Are we all still together on this?" That shift in question is the exact moment collective judgment fails. Now, here's where it gets even more uncomfortable, because when the decision finally fails, groups don't just avoid guilt. They actively rewrite history. Individual regret is painful, but it's functional. It teaches you. It changes your behavior. It makes you more careful next time. Collective regret almost never works that way. When a group faces the consequences of a bad decision, 3 predictable psychological maneuvers happen almost immediately. First, retrospective rationalization. The group reframes the decision as reasonable given the information they had at the time. We couldn't have known. It made sense in context. This is technically true, but it's used to avoid learning from the mistake, not to understand it. Second, scapegoating. When groups can't escape accountability completely, they concentrate the blame onto one person or one subgroup. The individual becomes the symbolic carrier of the collective failure, absorbing guilt that belonged to everyone. Third, strategic forgetting. The group simply moves on. Meetings happen. New projects are launched. The failure is never formally processed or discussed. It gets buried under momentum. None of this is a conspiracy. It happens automatically below the level of conscious awareness. Groups protect themselves the same way individuals protect themselves, through denial, deflection, and distraction. The difference is that when a group does it, there's no therapist's office, no moment alone at 3 a.m. where the truth surfaces. The collective armor is much harder to break. But here's the part most people miss entirely, and it directly affects you, even if you think you're not a group person. You might be thinking, I'm independent. I think for myself. This doesn't apply to me. That thought itself is a product of group influence. Humans are social animals with a biological need to belong. The groups we're embedded in, families, workplaces, friend circles, online communities, political identities, constantly shape what we believe is true, what we feel is acceptable, and what we allow ourselves to question. Research in social psychology consistently shows that most people overestimate their individual independence by a significant margin. We think we're reasoning from evidence. We're often reasoning from belonging. This is why when your team, your family, or your community moves in a direction that feels slightly wrong, the instinct to stay quiet is so powerful. Speaking up risks exclusion. And exclusion, at the neurological level, activates the same pain pathways as physical injury. Belonging is not a preference. It's a survival mechanism. So when you stay silent in a group, making a bad decision, you're not being cowardly. You're being human. The question is, once you understand this mechanism, can you start to operate differently? The answer is yes, but only if you can first recognize the exact moment the group is pulling you away from your own judgment. Knowing the psychology doesn't automatically protect you, but gives you 3 specific things you can do differently. 1. Separate your vote from your voice. Before agreeing out loud in any group setting, take 5 seconds to privately ask yourself, if I were deciding this alone, what would I choose? That gap between your private answer and your public one is the space where groupthink lives. 2. Name the pressure when you feel it. When the urge to stay silent arrives, it usually feels like discomfort or social anxiety. Recognize it specifically as conformity pressure. Naming it accurately weakens its power significantly. 3. Be the person who asks the uncomfortable question. Research shows that when even one person voices dissent in a group, it dramatically increases the quality of the group's final decision, even if the dissenting view turns out to be wrong. You don't need to be right. You need to be honest. Groups that build this habit of making individual accountability real before making collective decisions make measurably better choices. Not because they argue more, because they hide less. Here's the truth that ties everything together. Groups aren't dangerous because they're made of bad people. They're dangerous because they're made of people with the same need to belong, the same discomfort with conflict, and the same capacity for self-deception we all carry. The difference between a group that learns from failure and one that simply buries it isn't intelligence. It's the willingness of at least one person inside it to stay honest when staying quiet feels safer. That person can be you. If you found this useful, the video coming up next explores another invisible force that shapes group behavior, one most people experience every day without ever realizing what it's doing to them. It's right there on your screen. And if you want to keep understanding how the mind really works, join us. We dig into this every week.